tell me, have you ever had that feeling like you're looking at an old photograph where you're young, full of energy, next to someone who seemed an inseparable part of your life, and today that connection is gone? This feeling is particularly sharp when it comes to friendships that have lasted for decades. We're used to thinking that true friendship is forever. But what if, after 70, 75, even 80 years, you suddenly realize that your closest, oldest friend has become someone you find difficult to be around? It's not just sad. It can feel like a betrayal of yourself or of them. Why does this happen? People often talk about big arguments, money, politics. But today, I want to talk to you about three other, quieter, but no less destructive reasons, the kind rarely spoken about openly. Reasons that led me, yes, me, to make one of the hardest decisions of my life, to consciously distance myself from someone I considered my best friend for almost half a century. This isn't about anger or resentment in the usual sense. It's about something deeper, related to how we change with age and what becomes truly important to us at this stage of life. I promise that by the end of our conversation, you might see your own relationships in a new light and, importantly, feel more understanding and forgiveness towards yourself and others. Perhaps you'll even find comfort or validation for your own difficult feelings. Please stay with me. Let's explore this together. Reason 1, the unbearable weight of someone else's negativity. You know, with age, our own energy becomes, well, let's say, a precious resource. We can no longer, like in our youth, simply brush off someone else's bad mood, ignore endless complaints, or constant pessimism. It starts to settle inside, like dust on old furniture, making the air feel heavy and stale. I want to tell you about my friend. Let's call him Arthur. Arthur, now 78, was always the life of the party. We'd been friends since college. Imagine how many years. We went through weddings, the birth of children, then grandchildren, the loss of parents. It seemed nothing could tear us apart. But over the last 5 or 6 years, Arthur started to change. At first, it was subtle. Okay, he grumbles about the government. Who among us doesn't? Complains about his health. Who at our age doesn't have ailments? But gradually, this became the main backdrop of his life. Every conversation started with a list of everything wrong. The weather was awful, doctors were incompetent, children were inattentive, prices were rising, the world was going to hell. Initially, I genuinely sympathized. I tried to support him, steer the conversation towards something positive, recall funny stories from the past. But it was like trying to light a fire in pouring rain. My optimism, my attempts to find the bright side, simply drowned in his gloomy outlook on the world. I left our meetings feeling completely drained, as if all my energy, all my joy, had been sucked out. You know, it's like carrying a heavy backpack full of rocks. Tolerable at first, then your shoulders start to ache, and eventually, you just can't take another step. Arthur's backpack became too heavy for me to carry. I wrestled with guilt for a long time. How can I thought. This is Arthur, my best friend. He's just going through a tough time. I convinced myself I had to be there, that this is what true friendship means, supporting someone in their hour of need. But minutes turned into hours, hours into months, months into years. And his tough time never ended. Then I realized a harsh truth. His negativity had become his essence, and I could no longer afford to let his darkness consume my own light. Because at our age, every bright day, every hour of good mood is a gift. And I realized I have the right to protect my own peace of mind. It doesn't mean I stopped loving him or respecting our past, but I could no longer be his lightning rod. I started calling less often, politely declining meetings, citing being busy or not feeling well. It was excruciatingly difficult. It felt like betraying our history. But you know what happened next? My life had more air, more quiet joy. I didn't stop thinking of Arthur warmly, but I stopped feeling responsible for his happiness or unhappiness. It's like taking off that heavy backpack. Your back straightens, and it becomes easier to breathe. So, if you feel that interacting with someone, even a very close and longtime friend, consistently drains you, leaving only fatigue and despondency, that's not selfishness, it's a self-preservation instinct. Your emotional energy is your most valuable asset now. Protect it. Reason 2, when your life paths definitively diverge. Remember how in our youth, we often chose friends based on common interests: music, books, sports, dancing. We were similar, looking in the same direction. But life is a long road, and our paths don't always run parallel. Sometimes, especially in our later years, we discover we see the world completely differently. And it's not about arguing over politics or tastes. It's about fundamental values, about how we want to live our remaining years. I had a friend, Eleanor. We'd been friends since our children were in the same kindergarten. We baked pies together, discussed school problems, supported each other through family troubles. She was like a sister to me. But after 70, our paths began to diverge, like riverbeds that once flowed side by side before one turned away. I've always been an active person. After retiring, I took up gardening, signed up for watercolor classes, started reading more, going on weekend excursions. I wanted to learn new things, see the beauty of the world, interact with different people. Eleanor, however, chose a different path. She retreated into her own little world. Her main topics of conversation became illnesses, her own and others, complaints about her children and grandchildren, who, in her opinion, didn't pay her enough attention, and endless gossip about mutual acquaintances. At first, I tried to draw her out. "Eleanor, come to the exhibition with me. Let's go to the botanical garden on Saturday. Look at this interesting book I'm reading. I'll lend it to you later." But she always found excuses. Blood pressure, not in the mood, or what's the point at our age? Worse still, she started to somehow devalue my interests. "Oh, why are you always running around? You should just stay home quietly. Watercolors? Why bother? You won't become an artist anyway. There you go with your books again. You'd be better off telling me what's going on with Mary and her son-in-law." I felt like she was pulling me back into that state of apathy and dissatisfaction with life that I myself was trying hard to escape. Our meetings became boring for me, and then burdensome. I felt awkward sharing my joys because the response was either indifference or veiled judgment, and listening for hours about others' ailments and gossip was simply uninteresting to me. You know, it's like deciding to climb a mountain to see the sunrise, while your companion insists on sitting at the foot, saying it's cold and windy up there and nothing interesting anyway. For a while, you'll try to persuade them, invite them along. But if they stubbornly refuse, you either stay below with them, never seeing the dawn, or you go up alone. I chose the latter. I didn't make a scene or voice complaints. Our meetings just became less frequent, our conversations shorter. It happened somewhat naturally without drama, but inside there was bitterness. Bitter that the person with whom I had shared so many years remained somewhere else, on a different path. But I understood. You can't force another person to want what you want. You can't make them rejoice in life if they've chosen gloom. And you can't let their choice hinder your own path. We both had the right to our choices. It's just that our choices became incompatible for a continued close friendship. Therefore, if you feel that your life philosophies with a longtime friend have diverged too much, that you're no longer on the same path, it's not a betrayal. It's acknowledging reality. Sometimes friendships, like clothes, no longer fit, and it's okay to let them remain warm memories, but not try to squeeze back into them if they don't suit you anymore. You have the right to follow your own road, even if it leads you away from an old friend. Reason 3, the deafening silence where support was needed. Perhaps this is the most painful reason. We can forgive a friend for many things: forgetfulness, being late, even outbursts of anger. But there's one thing that's almost impossible to forgive, especially in later life: the absence of support when it's vitally needed. When your world is collapsing and your closest friend either pretends nothing is happening, offers platitudes, or, even worse, disappears. Let me tell you about David. He's nearly 80. His best friend, Michael, was truly like a brother to him. They'd been through thick and thin, as they say. They could always rely on each other. At least, that's what David thought. A few years ago, David's wife became seriously ill. It was a long and agonizing period: hospitals, doctors, sleepless nights, fear, despair. David needed support more than ever. Not so much physical help, but simple human connection. The chance to talk, to feel he wasn't alone. And this is where Michael failed him. He'd call, of course, ask, "How are things? Hang in there." But as soon as David tried to share his feelings, his pain, Michael would immediately change the subject to the weather, sports, some trivial matters of his own. Or he'd start offering misplaced advice like, you need to think positive or everything will be okay. David felt like he was knocking on a locked door, as if his friend simply didn't want to, couldn't, or was afraid to touch his grief. It became especially painful when David's wife passed away. Michael was at the funeral, of course, said the standard words of condolence, and then he vanished. He called rarely, responded evasively to suggestions to meet. David felt abandoned. The person he thought would be his rock in his darkest day had simply removed himself. You know, it's like standing by a well in the desert, dying of thirst, only to find the well is empty. Decades of friendship, all those shared memories, vows of eternal loyalty, it all turned out to be just a beautiful backdrop. And when real water was needed, there was none. David couldn't accept it for a long time. He looked for excuses for Michael. Maybe he's afraid of old age and death himself. Maybe he just doesn't know what to say. But the fact remained. In the most difficult moment of his life, his best friend left him alone. It wasn't a fight. David didn't try to hash things out. What for? To hear more empty words or awkward excuses? He simply realized that this friendship, the one he believed in, was gone. Only a shell, a memory, remained, and he made the choice not to cling to that emptiness. He focused on those people, relatives, neighbors, new acquaintances from his hobby club, who were truly there, who weren't afraid of his grief, who could just sit quietly beside him or listen without interrupting. This is a very bitter lesson, but an important one. At our age, true friendship isn't tested by shared meals or happy memories. It's tested by the willingness to be there in times of trouble. It doesn't have to be anything heroic. Sometimes, just listening is enough. Just being present. If your longtime friend proved incapable of this in a critical moment, it's not your fault, but it's a sign that the depth of that friendship might have been an illusion, and you have every right to seek and cherish connections where there is genuine, sincere support, where your well won't be empty when you need a drink of water. So, these are the 3 reasons, my dears. 3 quiet but powerful forces that can destroy even the seemingly strongest friendships after 70, suffocating negativity, incompatibility of life paths, and the absence of genuine support in difficult times. Perhaps some of this resonated within your own heart, in your own experience. You know, making the decision to distance oneself from a longtime friend is always painful. There's sadness in it, regret for the past. But I want to tell you this. You've lived a long, rich life. You've accumulated wisdom. You understand yourself and your needs better. And you have the full, undeniable right to peace, joy, and emotional balance in your golden years. You have the right to choose an environment that nourishes you, not drains you, that supports you, not pulls you down, that shares your values, or, at the very least, respects them. This isn't selfishness. It's self-care. It's not a betrayal of the past. It's a conscious choice in favor of your present and future. Please don't blame yourself if you've had to or are having to make similar decisions. Be kind and compassionate towards yourself, your life, your well-being, your peace of mind. That's what matters most. You deserve to be surrounded by warmth, understanding, and true, sincere support. Believe in yourself and your right to happiness at any age. You are strong, you are wise, and you will get through this.